Genzken retrospective is the first retrospective of this world-renowned sculptor from Germany. The fact that Genzken hasn't had a retrospective in the United States is a large lacuna in our exhibition history, and one that has been recognized, fortunately, by a number of us. It is more than a lacuna, though. It's an opportunity for the United States to be introduced for the first time to 40 years of very pivotal work. The thing about Genzken's oeuvre is that it has a tremendous variety, beginning with carved wooden sculptures and continuing today with room-size found object assemblages. That said, this is an artist who has a laser-like focus on very specific themes. And walking through this exhibition is kind of like walking through a novel, a great story, what the Germans would call a Bildungsroman, beginning with Genzken's student days, where she was one of the very first artists to mess with computer programming. She worked with a computer programmer to create these long extruded sculptures that she called ellipsoids and hyperbolos. After that, she was one of the very first artists to work in a conceptual manner with photography, photographing stereo equipment, high-end stereo equipment, as if they were fashion models. In the 1980s, Genzken began experimenting with concrete, epoxy resin, and plaster, and she did this in a sustained examination of architectural details, architectural forms. Her concrete works are named after buildings, and they remind one of ruins or even construction sites. While the concretes were interested in bulk and form, the epoxy resins were really examinations of luminosity and permeability. Genzken looked towards architectural details, particularly windows, and she created a series of windows and what she called paravents, or screens. And the work behind me that is shaped like what we would call a Chicago window is that. It's a kind of mixture between a screen and a window, but what it really does is show us how architectural structures can allow space to permeate through them. In fact, Genzken once said, and this was, I find, very poetic, she said, her sculptures don't displace space, they create them. In and around 1996, the winter of 1995, Genzken spent a sustained period in New York City, and at that time she created a collage book called I Love New York, Crazy City, that compiled photographs of buildings and people and everything that made New York exciting to her. And this scrapbook became, in a way, an inspiration for a whole new era in Genzken's work, and that is of assembled sculpture, made of objects that Genzken found or bought. Her latest work is called The Schauspieler, or The Actors, and it consists of a bevy of 12 mannequins dressed up, some in Genzken's clothes, some in clothes that she found, as fantastic characters in a world that very well could be in Genzken's imagination. But one thing that's super great about this work and about all of Genzken's work is that they are odd characters that also could be in our world today. She's not only incorporating these works to comment on our society of consumption of things, but equally importantly, she's celebrating the possibility of making these great everyday sculptures and having those sculptures in our lives. There's a great story that can be told from the objects and the detritus of our lives.